I will not attempt to discover whether legislation is needed before I first determine whether it's constitutionally permissible. And if I should later be attacked for neglecting my constituents' interests, I shall reply that I was informed that their main interest is liberty, and in that cause I'm doing the very best that I can. Now, to me, that is what you call a clear vision statement of why one would be in politics. Can you imagine what our Congress would look like if we had 535 members of Congress who had that as their vision statement? And it goes back to the importance of every one of you insisting upon, not just in this cause, but the greater extensions that come as a result of this cause, in insisting upon a clear vision of what one is to be about in their time in office or in their involvement in the world of politics. And finally, I would simply say this. I would beg of you to keep going back to the grassroots. It really is the key to changing things in Washington, D.C. Washington's not the key. What happens out there across the country is the key. Things bubble up more slowly than they would like, but I mean, there is a liberty movement. You think about Justin Amash, who I think is going to speak in just a moment, or you think about Tom Massey, you think about what Rand Paul, I mean, there is a liberty movement that wasn't there when I was there alone, oftentimes voting with Ron Paul. And it's there because of y'all's involvement. And just to underscore this greater point of the power and impact that individuals can have, let me just leave you with one last story, and it's the story of Colonel Joshua Chamberlain. I've always loved the story because, you know, here's a guy who was professor of languages at Bowdoin College in Maine. He signs up for the Civil War thinking, well, this will be a fun and interesting experience. It turns out to be none of the above. And so he's there stepping out of his tent in June of 1863. Horse and rider come up, assigned to him 200 deserters from Maine. Not exactly the kind of fighting force that you'd hope for. I mean, these folks have thought so little of the effort that they've literally headed for the hills, been caught, recaptured, and brought back. And here he looks up on the hill, here come these men in shackles. He goes out, greets them, unshackles them, gives them food and water. And he must have been thinking, what in the world do I say to these folks? Because his orders are to either take them with them or shoot them. And so finally he reaches down, he scratches in the Pennsylvania soil, and he says simply this. He says, this is free ground. From here all the way to the Pacific, no man has to bow, no man born to royalty. Here we judge you by what you do, not who your father was. Here you can be something. Here's a place to build a home. It isn't the land, there's always more land. It's the idea that you and me, we have value. We're worth something more than the dirt. I'd never ask you to come to join us to fight for dirt. What we're all fighting for in the end is each other. His words were prophetic, both then and now, because as fate would have it, a couple days later, he and his 200 deserters from Maine find themselves on the very far left flank of what turned out to be the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. And through rather miraculous fighting, they hold that far left flank. That sets up the infamous third day of the Battle of Gettysburg. I mean, quite literally, he and his 200 deserters from Maine changed the course of the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, which changed the course of the Battle of Gettysburg, which changed the course of the Civil War, which changed the course of the history of this nation, which has changed the course of the history of the world. I mean, I'm a Southerner, but I will be honest in saying if we were a nation divided, I don't know exactly who would have been there to have met Nazi aggression in World War II, or Japanese imperialism in World War II, or a whole host of other challenges that have come our civilization's way. Exactly right. Exactly right. He would be for two countries, and it's an open debate. But I would take the other side of the debate, and I'd simply make this point, wherever you fall on that simply point. And that is, if 200 deserters from Maine can have that kind of impact in world history, then imagine what you and I and others collectively working on this theme called freedom and liberty can do going forward. I look forward to working with you on that cause, and I thank you again for what you all do on a daily basis. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.